Hi, my name is Brandon Menard, and I'm recording this video to talk to you about my capstone project, entitled Trust and the Rise of Modern American Ideological Tribalism. Sounds a little boring, I know, but stick with me, I promise it gets a little bit interesting. So what we're covering in this epic trailer for an epic paper? Well, first we're going to cover the inception of this research paper to give it some context. Next, we're going to break down what ideological tribalism is and its formation. And lastly, we'll cover some of the conclusions and actions that could render a solution. So why this topic? Why is it important? We've seen the fever pitch of ideological tribalism boil over in recent years. As our society has grown more divisive, the chasm between us has grown bigger. This divide has shined a light on the crisis of belonging. Those who feel left behind or singled out are searching for community and connection to fit their worldview. Political difference is now lost to moral discords, where agreeing to disagree is increasingly difficult. It speaks to the lack of trust in people, in our institutions, how we operate our relationships, exasperated only by our current political divide. This vulnerability, this search for community, leads many down a dubious path. Validated in these communities, they are indoctrinated by disinformation that can radicalize them to circle into their ideological tribe. In a lot of ways, this paper was born from my current relationship with my father, due to his own right-wing indoctrination and embracement of conspiracy theories. We have been on opposite sides of the political spectrum for years, leading to an occasional heated debate, but never finding our relationship affected. But after my mom passed away 6 years ago, my dad decided to move back to his hometown of Houma, Louisiana, a deep red, blue-collar working town near the rest of our family. There, he was soon surrounded by people who were themselves already indoctrinated into far-right extremist politics. It wasn't long before conspiracy theories became a part of our conversations, and any dissent would cause a knockdown, drag-out fight. It got so bad that we avoided each other for months at times until one of us would feel guilty enough to reach out to the other. While we found civil discourse today, our relationship is not the same. And sadly, my story isn't uncommon from the stories I hear and read about. So many families divided, friendships ended, and relationships strained over this far-right radicalized tribalism. Beyond superficial political differences, people have taken to sides in a with us or against us mentality, no matter the cost. Because of its effect on society, understanding how people who could previously be close now stand pitted against each other is not only intriguing, but necessary. Ultimately, my experience and other anecdotal evidence led me to this conclusion. My paper will connect how the decay in trust, exclusion, and the need for belonging create a void. And this void is only filled by finding these connections in like-minded ideological tribes, where members are indoctrinated, even radicalized with disinformation and conspiracy propaganda. How has decay in trust led to the rise of modern American ideological tribalism? More importantly, how does it restore us? I intend to show that by restoring trust in ourselves and our institutions, we can restore belonging across ideological tribes. My research found comprehensive and wide-ranging literature in many disciplines, and I will not attempt to survey all the disciplines in detail. Rather, I will consult them in a disciplinary manner to provide ample evidence from multiple areas of study. So, ideological tribalism. How did we get here? 71% of Americans believe people are less confident in each other than 20 years ago. And truthfully, the collapse of trust is real. Not just a mirage from the imagination of a nostalgic bygone era. A Pew Research study found in a 1958 survey that 73% of Americans said they could trust the government, and the numbers actually rose in the 1960s. But by 2019, the figure had plummeted to 19%. Another study found a strong positive correlation between GDP growth and social trust. But Americans distrust the institutions on which we depend. Increasingly, we distrust one another even. Whether we rebuild that trust will determine whether we can build a better future. Belonging is a basic human need. Socially, it carries the power to bind us together and motivate us to depend on one another. People who are assured by a sense of belonging are better able to trust one another implicitly. It furnishes a kind of down payment on the process of trust building. But with so many feeling excluded these days, due to mental health, job loss, and so on, the search for belonging leaves many desperate for community and answers. Many fall victim to self-preservation as the changes around them unleash pressures that cause people and communities to experience a sense of loss, abandonment, and disenfranchisement. If their ideology leans conservative, it's easy to find belonging in far-right tribes, as the steps from Fox News to OAN to even QAnon are not so distant. Polarization is both a state and a process. Polarization as a state refers to the extent to which opinions on an issue are opposed in relation to some theoretical maxim. Polarization as a process refers to the increase in such opposition over time. Some political scientists say that current polarization depends less on the left or right scale policy differences, but more on the divisions: religion against secular, nationalists against globalists, traditional against modern, rural against urban. And researchers also found that providing people with information regarding a contentious issue is ineffective for reducing polarization because people process such information in a biased manner. Polarization itself can be innocuous, straightforward, and democratizing, or it can have long-term damaging and adverse effects in society, most commonly with congesting essential democratic functions. Political scientists contend that media influence has particularly affected the voting public in the last 3 decades, as previously less partisan viewers are given more polarized news media choices. National survey data from 1998 to 2006 suggests the mass media's current, fragmented, high-choice environment has provoked a movement of the audience from more moderate political programming to more antagonistic and one-sided broadcasts and articles, appealing to each tribe who watched the polarized programming as a self-affirming source for their ideology. And an MIT study that analyzed over 126,000 Twitter posts tweeted by 3 million individuals found that fake news, misinformation, and false rumors have more reach, spreading 6 times faster than more accurate information. In the paper, I detail examples of indoctrination, as well as cover a variety of connections to cult-like behavior exhibited by far-right tribes, specifically QAnon. From the start, lots of the predictions that Q was making weren't coming true, like the very first post in 2017. As QAnon prophecies would come and go, the goalpost and the explanation would remain fluid. Members would rationalize with cognitive dissonance. But QAnon was not the start, as there is a through line going as far back as the Reagan administration, who pushed an anti-government agenda. Resolving. We're building trust and belonging. So many of you might be asking, how do we move away from this us versus them mentality? If we're so divided, how is it possible to return to a time of bipartisanship, or more importantly, civil discourse? Indeed, this has been a generation-long conditioning. But for all the peril of this moment, for all the political division, anguish, and institutional erosion, this moment is filled with possibility. Inevitably, there is more that unites us than divides us. Common ground is not as uncommon as it appears. Communication. How we create and frame dialogue is important. Researchers found that environmental policies framed as protecting people from harm were supported far more by liberals. But when the same policies were framed as protecting the environment from pollution, conservatives supported the policy as much as liberals. Often the policy goals are in the majority, but the disinformation convinces people otherwise. Finding ways to go beyond the noise, simplify the rhetoric to appeal to the moral foundation of your audience will often open respectful dialogue. Simply put, kill them with kindness. Being inclusive can harness belonging and the trust that comes with it. Ultimately, looking for common ground provides inclusion. That inclusion gives someone a place to feel welcome. Consequently, they are less likely to seek out alternative communities and remain less vulnerable to indoctrination. Trust is a modest contribution, more like a signpost than a roadmap, and its purpose is to suggest that we pay more attention to the central role of trust, how it's earned, how it's verified, transparency and accountability. When you can't trust anything, you have to spend your waking thoughts questioning everything. Something like that can help you survive in, say, a war zone, but in no way is how we should live. We live in a country whose most radical founding premise was that people could be trusted to govern themselves, and that the people, trusted in this way, would produce leaders who themselves are worthy of trust. The more America's political system trusted Americans, the more trustworthy the American project would become. It seems trust, often unseen, is indispensable for a healthy, functioning society. And in the absence of trust, nothing that works can work well. And with that, thank you for your time and your consideration in listening to my presentation for my Capstone project. I look forward to hearing from any of you and look forward to reading your papers as well as you reading mine. Thanks.